Hello everyone, I'm Baruffy1322 and in this video I'm going to be showing the fastest fully upgraded SUVs around the circuit and the best cars to use for races. For the full story about what I did, check the annotation on the screen or the link in the description for the intro video, but otherwise, let's get straight into it. So the SUVs class is the second largest in the game with 20 different cars, and in last place is the Crusader. Now the Crusader can only be used in the lobby screen before a race. It isn't actually in the SUVs class as such, but it can be used in SUV races. In 19th place is the Patriot. The Patriot is the slowest fully upgradable and proper SUV. With a 1 minute 24.1, it's ridiculously slow. It just doesn't get around the corners very well at all. So in 18th place is the Park Ranger. Now this is basically the same as the Crusader. It's not actually an SUV, but it can be used in SUV races, and the Park Ranger and the Crusader are the only two cars in this class that aren't actually upgradable, even though they are raceable. So in 17th place we've got the Seminole. Seminole, not a lot to say about this. It's a reasonably slow vehicle with a 1 minute 21.9. Just doesn't have a lot going for it, but it's certainly a lot better than the Patriot, that's for sure. In 16th place we have the Mesa. Now this is slightly slower than the Merryweather Mesa, so the one that you get from the Merryweather guys who chase after you. This is a little bit slower than that, a 121.2 there, not that much greater than the Seminole that we just saw. So in 15th we have the Baller. Now this is the older version of the Baller. It looks a bit more square. With a 1 minute 20.9 it is a little bit quicker than the Mesa, but overall it's not really going to be doing much in a race. In 14th place we have the BJXL. The BJXL is a bit too rigid, it's a bit too boxy, a bit too slow really. With a 1 minute 20.3, I would say all of these SUVs around this area could be good if they were able to be raced together, but overall they aren't going to be getting the pace of the top vehicles. So 13th place for the Grizzly, takes a bit of a jump in lap time there with a 1 minute 20.0, a little bit more power to these ones now we're starting to get, but still not that great around the corners. And in 12th place we have the Cavalcade. Now there are two versions of the Cavalcade. There's the older version and the newer version, but they are exactly the same in terms of lap time and in terms of performance. It's only a few slight differences in the body styling. So in 11th place we've got the FQ2. Now this is probably the first SUV that's quite nice to drive. With a 1 minute 19.6, it's still not that quick, and it does have poor braking, but in terms of getting around the corners it does feel quite nice. So the top 10, and in 10th place we have the Habanero. The Habanero does have some good pace to it. It's not too bad around the corners. It's got a reasonable amount of power. With a 1 minute 19.1, a little bit quicker than what we just saw from the FQ2. You can certainly do a lot worse than the Habanero. It doesn't feel too bad. For an SUV, it is quite a nice vehicle to drive, but overall it's still quite far off the pace of the top vehicles in the class. So in 9th place we have the Dubster. Now this is actually the Dubster 2, and you'll be able to see a few slight differences based on the Dubster 2 and the regular Dubster, the main one being the tailgate is over to the left. Now the Dubster 2 is basically exactly the same as the regular Dubster without the tailgate spare wheel. Now I will come on to that when we come on to the regular Dubster when we see that, but basically all you need to know is that the Dubster 2 is reasonably quick, but it's not quite as quick as the regular Dubster. So in 8th place is the Landstalker. It's quite a surprise to see such a big and bulky vehicle right up there high in 8th place with a 1 minute 18.4, but it does have some reasonably good cornering capabilities for the class, and in terms of top speed it's not too bad as well. Overall it's nothing special really, the Landstalker, especially in terms of modifications and things like that. Again, it's still not on the pace of the top SUVs and it's still quite far off, but it's not too bad just as a bit of a runaround. So in 7th place is the Granger. Now the Granger can hold 8 people, so 4 inside and 4 on the outside, which straight away makes it a very, very good option just for travelling around in free roam. In a race, again, it's not going to be on the pace with a 1 minute 17.8, but it's not that slow, it's certainly good for carrying around a lot of people in free roam, and that would be its main focus really. Certainly not racing, but yeah, it's still quite a useful vehicle overall. So in 6th place is the Serrano. Now this is the only SUV in the game that has a spoiler, or what we should say an official spoiler. But with a 1 minute 17.6, it's not too bad. You know, it does have some reasonably good traction in the corners because of that extra spoiler. It doesn't have an awful lot of power, and that's what really lets it down. But the spoiler does help it to get that lap time up a little bit and give it that 1 minute 17 that we see. Now, in 5th place, just ahead of it, is the regular Dubster. Now, there are a few slight differences between the regular Dubster and the Dubster 2 in terms of body modifications, but the main one is that tailgate spare wheel on the back. With the regular Dubster, that actually improves traction just like a spoiler. Because the Dubster 2 gets that as stock and can't remove it, that acts like a stock spoiler like you would get on the Comet and doesn't improve traction. So basically that extra, if you add that spare wheel on the back of the regular Dubster, you'll be getting a much quicker lap time, and that elevates the regular Dubster up into 5th place. So in 4th place is the Rakoto. Now the Rakoto does feel quite nice to drive, you know, it's quite well balanced in the corners, I would say, for an SUV. It just lacks that overall power and overall traction of the guys at the top, but that 1 minute 16.8 that we see is quite a big gap to over the Dubster and the Serrano that we've just seen. It is quite a nice vehicle to drive. So in 3rd place is the Radius. Now the Radius is basically all about cornering. It has one of the highest levels of traction of all the SUVs, but its weakness is definitely straight line speed, so it probably doesn't have as much power in a straight line, even as some of the SUVs that we've already seen further on down the order. But in terms of cornering capabilities, it's one of the best, and that's where it gets its lap time out of. You've got to be able to really throw it around those corners, but because it has a lot of traction, it will stick. And obviously that 1 minute 16.0 is quite a big jump in lap time over the Rakoto that we just saw, but you do need to be careful on tracks with longer straights because it will be at a weakness. And that's where the number 2 vehicle shines. There's the Baller. We haven't seen the Baller for a while, but this is the newer version of the Baller, and it is a lot quicker than the older version. Obviously it's the more rounded, more sportier version, and on this track the Baller and the Radius are reasonably well balanced. As you can see there's very little to choose between them, with a 1 minute 16.0 for both. But the Baller is all about straight line speed, so it's basically the polar opposite of the Radius. The Baller really does suffer in the corners. It doesn't have very good traction, but it's all about straight line speed, it's all about top speed, and it's basically on a track like this, they're pretty well balanced, but it's all based on the track that you're actually racing as to which one you choose. But in 1st place is the Huntly S. Now the Huntly S is absolutely dominant in the class, more so than any other car in any other class barring the vans and the utility vehicles. With a 1 minute 13.7, it's 2.3 seconds per lap quicker than the next best of the Baller. That is huge. Over a 73-second lap, that is absolutely huge. And I'm fairly certain that is the biggest gap from 1st to 2nd that we see, apart from in the vans and the utility vehicles class. It has the traction of the Radius and a bit more besides. It has the power of the Baller and a bit more besides as well. And it just puts it all together very nicely in a nice well-rounded vehicle. Not a lot of roll in the corners, feels well planted. It's so dominant in the class, and it's a shame that we've got a class that has 20 different vehicles in it, which is the 2nd largest in the entire game behind the sports cars, and we still only have one car that can really compete. I mean, you can use all of the other SUVs if you want, but you're going to be at such a disadvantage to anybody using the Huntly S. So on the one hand, obviously it's nice to see one vehicle be so good, but it would be nice to have a few different options in the class. So there you have it. The Huntly S is the absolute best for the SUVs. Let me know all your thoughts down below. Let me know what you thought about this. Would you like to see some more SUVs that could be usable? Obviously, feel free to subscribe if you want to see future episodes, and you can check the description for previous episodes as well. I really do appreciate your support as always. Thanks a lot for watching. Be sure to like, comment, all that good stuff if you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.